Welcome to FranklinCovey on Leadership. I'm Will Hodling, FranklinCovey's head of product, and in this podcast, we'll walk through the mistakes, methods, and mindsets that built many of the world's most credible leaders. We hope that their hard-earned insights help accelerate you on your journey. Today's guest is Jerry Colonna, business builder, investor, and expert executive coach. Jerry was one of the founders of Flatiron Partners, one of New York City's premier venture capital firms, and led tech investing at JP Morgan's private equity arm. Today, Jerry is the CEO of Reboot.io, a leading executive coaching and leadership development company, and he's also the best-selling author of two great books, Reboot and Reunion. Jerry Colonna, welcome to On Leadership. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me. It's a delight to be here with you.
Lovely. I'm very excited about today's conversation. I've been a long-time listener and reader of your work, and I think also your ethos of the importance of radical self-inquiry really overlaps with FranklinCovey's focus on leadership development happening inside out. So in your work, you talk about the importance of radical self-inquiry, how we should investigate our childhood memories, our earliest experiences, because they consciously and subconsciously drive our values, our motivations. And so I would like to start today with a little bit of your origin story, learning more about kind of how you grew up and how that experience shaped the person you came to be. In particular, I've heard before a story from your grandpa about the lemon drops in the tin. And so that's a great one to start with, and would love to, if you could tell us a little bit about your background, that'd be great.
Sure. And that's a good way to understand this. And before I go into the story, I think the simplest way to understand the phrase radical self-inquiry is with a question, which is, why do I do what I do? And why do I feel what I feel? Mm. And the simplest way to understand that is when I was in my late 30s, I was a very, very successful VC. As I often joked, I was kind of a master of the universe, flying back and forth across the country and really having these extraordinary experiences and making myself sick in the process. And there's a famous story I tell about flying across the country, firing the CEO of a portfolio company, and then getting on a plane in the exact same day and flying back to New York. And I get into the house, and my daughter, who is now 32 and about to be a mother herself, was 3 years old. And I walk into the house, and I look at the flight of stairs, and she's at the top. And all of a sudden, I spin around, and I collapse on the floor and hit my head against the bathroom door. And the last thing I hear before I go out is, "Mommy, Mommy, Daddy's dying."
Wow.
Okay. And the reason I start with that is because, to answer your question and to connect it back to childhood, I go into therapy after that. And my therapist says to me, "Jerry, what's it going to take for you to stop?" And the thing I said that surprised even me was Bill Gates. And what I meant was, I had to have as much money as Bill Gates. And she looked at me and said, "What are you doing?" Now this connects back to this story about the lemon drops. When I was a kid, we grew up incredibly poor. Food insecure, 7 kids, not enough at all. And my grandfather, Dominic Guido, was an iceman in Brooklyn. And the miraculous thing about him was that he always seemed to have enough. And the symbol for me was in this green door pantry outside of his kitchen was a tin. And inside the tin were lemon drops. And what I associated with the notion of plenty and safety and security were those lemon drops. So fast forward all the way to this point where I'm flying across the country and I'm a big deal, right? And putting my daughter through the trauma of watching her father collapse and thinking that he was dying. Because I was in a never-ending pursuit of enough lemon drops to feel safe and secure. That story is a perfect expression of, why do I do what I do? Why am I so nuts as to drive myself crazy? So thanks for asking that question. It's a good setup question for me.
Absolutely. It's a powerful anecdote. And I would love to hear about that transition from master of the universe. You start Flatiron Partners. It's wildly successful. You're at JP Morgan, leading tech investing for private equity arm. And then now you're leading executive coaching, leading Reboot. Talking about that transition period, what happened that caused you to end that business chapter of your career and move into this kind of leadership development and helping others help themselves?
So in September 2001, there were the 9/11 attacks. And earlier in that year, I had begun to have this massive depression, driven in part by this relentless striving that was going on inside of me, this relentless sense that I wasn't enough. And I had left Flatiron Partners, which was my first venture firm, and I had agreed to join JP Morgan. But I was already beginning to have some challenges about whether or not it was the right thing to do. The 9/11 attacks happen. It kind of rocks my world. I ended up joining the Olympic bid committee. We were trying to bring the 2012 Olympic Games to New York City. I threw myself into trying to rebuild the city. But everything that I did just made me feel more and more empty and hollow. Fast forward to February 2nd, 2002. And I'm leaving an Olympic bid committee meeting, and I'm overwhelmed by the feeling that I need to kill myself. And my plan in that moment was to go to the subway station and jump in front of a train. Now, to be clear, when I was a young man in my late teens, I had attempted suicide.
Wow.
And the depression that had marked my life ever since I was a kid was still there. It was still a profound experience. And thankfully, wisely, I chose not to leap and instead called my therapist, who said to me, get in a cab and come out and see me. She was in Great Neck. And the reason I tell that moment is because it's at that moment that everything that I am today, the executive coach, author of books, someone that people want to talk to, want to share their stories with, everything stems from that decision not to take my life. That began a profound transition. At the time, I was working at JP Morgan. By the end of that year, I had quit. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I knew that I just needed to stop and sit still and examine my life and figure out, why is it that I do the things that I do? And most importantly, who is the person I want to be? And I'll tell you, to this day, that's the question that I put to clients all the time. Who are you as a leader? Who do you want to be? If your children were to come to work for you today, would you be proud? Would you be a little ashamed at the way you lead? What is the person you are becoming? And how can we make that a conscious process? So it's a long-winded response to your question, but that's the Saul on the road to Damascus becoming Paul moment. That's the moment where I'm struck down and the way I was living my life, the inner part of me and the outer part of me were in complete conflict. And if I continued that path, I was going to die.
Yeah, so powerful. And those are such powerful questions for all of us to consider. When you got to your therapist's office in that moment, what did they say? And yeah, what did they say? What were the questions they asked you that really stopped and created this moment of inflection for you?
Well, it's a funny story. I said to her, I got into the office and I said, it was a psychoanalyst, Dr. Sayers. I worked with her for 30 years.
Oh,
God rest her soul. She passed away 7 years ago at 93. Wow. And she put up with me for a long time. She was my good mother.
Did you work with her all the way until 93?
I did.
Wow.
I did. Anyway, I walked in and I said, send me to the hospital. I'm done. And she was a nice Jewish lady from Brooklyn, so she would often make jokes. And what she said to me was, what do you want to go to a hospital for? The food sucks. You should go to Canyon Ranch. You'll get a massage every day. That's what you should do. So I went to Canyon Ranch. And on my flight down to Canyon Ranch, I read 3 books. Let Your Life Speak by Parker Palmer, Faith by Sharon Salzberg, and When Things Fall Apart by Pema Chodron. The latter 2 books are written by Buddhist teachers. The first is written by a Quaker teacher and writer, Parker Palmer. And you know what? I have had the great, great good fortune of becoming friends with all 3 of them. And those 3 books changed my life. And if I am doing any good in the world with the work I do, it's directly as a consequence of the shoulders that I stand on of those 3 people. Because those 3 people taught me that there's a way out of the dissonant depression that I was experiencing at the time.
Before that moment and before you read those books, what was your relationship to faith?
Oh, complicated. I was raised a Catholic, and like a lot of Catholic teenagers, said, I want nothing to do with this. And then I began to understand that there's something deeply important, something beyond this meat bag of me. And the disconnection that I had experienced, call it divine, call it nature. I said before that the inner and the outer of me were, to use Parker's words, crosswise with each other. But it was actually even more profound. And no one has ever asked me this question before about the relationship with faith and me. It was complicated. It made me really examine what it was that was really missing inside of me. I don't say this to beat myself up or to beat up anybody who's going through a depression, but my inability to feel empathy and compassion for others, or more specifically, I'll say it this way, my ability to feel empathy and compassion for others is what saved me. And that sounds counterintuitive. I remember one time going to a retreat with Pema Chodron, and there's about 300 people in this big tent, and we're asking questions, and I'm online asking a question, and I stand up and I said, I've just become more deeply in touch with the wounds that I experienced as a child. And I don't know what to do with that. And she gave me a very specific instruction. She said, when you sit in meditation in the morning, and let's make this more inclusive, when you sit in prayer, I want you to think of all the people, past, present, and future, who have experienced the same amount of suffering that you have. In Buddhism, we'd say it's bodhicitta, it's open heart. And I'll tell you, that was hard. But she was right. And when I get down on myself, even today, when I get trapped in my own head, what saves me is thinking about clients. How can I be in service to them?
Tell me about that transition from working on yourself after this, depressive episode and after the realization that you are not living in alignment with your values and principles. You worked on yourself extensively through radical self-inquiry, and then at some point you decided my calling, my career should be in helping others go through a similar experience that I went through. When did you transition from working on myself to helping others?
It's a Mobius strip. It's a continuous process, right? The key organizing question of my first book, Reboot, is how have I been complicit in creating the conditions I say I don't want? That's a radical self-inquiry question. It's an inwardly focused question. And it's not designed to provoke guilt. It's designed to provoke curiosity. The key organizing question of my second book, which is called Reunion, Leadership and the Longing to Belong, I said about that book, worried about the divisiveness that exists in our world today. And what is the responsibility of someone like me, a leader like me, with all my power and privilege? What is my responsibility? And the key organizing question there is, how have I been complicit in and benefited from a world I say I don't want to see? To put it another way,
say that again.
how have I been complicit in and benefited from a world I say I don't want to see? There are children starving. What am I doing about that? How is it? And so you ask the question as if it's step one and then step two, and I want to emphasize that it's actually a continuous process. Step one, step two, step one, step two, step one, step two. Because, and this is a Buddhist concept, you and I are interconnected. Your suffering is my suffering. The way, right now we live in a world where there's almost a war on empathy. It's actually been declared. And the only way out of the conundrum that we find ourselves in is compassion. Every single wisdom tradition, I don't care what religious belief you have, every single wisdom tradition teaches the same thing. Compassion. Care. I am my brother's keeper. This is not only the way we solve the world, this is how I alleviate my suffering. This is how, because you've read the books, my core statement is that better humans make better leaders. Which means my obligation as a leader is to work on myself as a human being. Because the worst thing we do is we give power to people who are wounded, with unprocessed challenges, and all they do is spread toxicity throughout the world in a vain attempt to close a black hole of need inside their chest. Empathy, compassion, love. If I sound old-fashioned, so be it. I just know this to be true. And I will be speaking of these things until my dying day.
Yeah. You have worked with hundreds of leaders, probably thousands of leaders at this point, in your capacity as executive coach, Reboot, with your offsites and immersive retreats. You also have spoken extensively about your years, decades of psychoanalysis personally. Where do you view coaching and therapy as similar and different?
Well, I will acknowledge that because of I am a trained executive coach, and I bring a lot of organizational development understanding into the process. But I will acknowledge that a lot of the roots of how I approach coaching stems from the work I have done in psychoanalysis. And psychoanalysis itself is old-fashioned. Right now, there's a lot of help being, a lot of progress being made by the use of psychedelics and that kind of experience, but nothing replaces doing the interior work necessary for true transformation. A core difference is that in good transformative executive coaching, we're taking the past and really working towards changing the present and creating the future. Now, there is a blurring. And I think that when you combine the individual work in a systemic way, like if I work with a CEO and I'm also honored to work with the senior leadership team, then I get to see those patterns across an entire organization. And that's not work that a therapist or an analyst would ever be able to do. And it's two different realms that are complementary in that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. When you work with a leader, a CEO, or you work with a leadership team, and it doesn't work.
It never happens.
You're batting 100%, I'm sure. But why? When it doesn't work, what went wrong? And kind of what can you and what can we learn from that in creating more predictable, sustainable, transformational experiences?
What comes to mind is a client that I work with for a long time now, 6 years. And he still does the same things. And I said to him, either I'm a lousy coach or you're really a tough case. What the honest answer is, it kind of depends on what we're defining as success. There's significant progress where patterns are altered, where patterns are revealed, patterns are altered in a conscious way, and everybody lives happily ever after. And then there are the more likely scenarios where it takes incremental progress that's directionally correct. And sometimes it takes a long time, and sometimes it takes someone else to pick up the work that I've done and continue that process. I'm not sure that that's a failure, though.
Mm-hmm.
What typically does happen when a sense of coaching not working happens, it's because what happened at the beginning, it was kind of the goal was misidentified. Mm-hmm. You know, in coaching terminology, we often talk about the presenting agenda, the secondary agenda, and the tertiary agenda, the third agenda. And it's the third agenda that's the transformative agenda. Client will come in and say, I need help doing X, Y, and Z. But it really takes 3, 4, 6 months before the transformational engender occurs.
Hmm.
Client may come in and say, I need help learning how to be a better CEO. And by the second or third agenda, what's really clear is they don't want to be a CEO.
Hmm.
And so is that success? I mean, the company that hired me may not think it's success.
Yeah.
But the client walks away feeling clearer and more focused and ready to move on in their next phase of their life.
Yeah. Speaking of defining success, in a lot of your work, you talk about the importance of developing equanimity over driving towards material outcomes. And there, I imagine, is a tension in what you do in that you are working with a lot of CEOs that have investors or they have shareholders, and they are interested in radical inquiry potentially as a means to an end of transformative leadership and better business outcomes, et cetera. Talking about how you navigate the tension between maybe leaders who are looking for huge professional outcomes and success, and actually your work is more about, who are you truly in this world?
It's a great question because, you called it right. There's a tension between those two. And I'll get a little intellectual for a moment. It's a mistake to think that all tension should be resolved. Okay? And that's a really important concept. When tension like that, from that dichotomy, exists, the best way to work with it is to actually bring it out even further. Now, what do I mean? The metaphor that I tend to use between these two impulses is what I call content and container. So what do I mean by that? So a container is the structure of a business. It's the profit and loss statement. It's the products. The container of an individual might be the professional iteration of who they are. The content of the individual is the who am I? Who do I want to be? Who am I becoming? What are my values? What are my ethics? The content of a business is what is it that we're bringing forth, right? So as a CEO, I could teach you to make money. You can make money selling methamphetamines. But should you? See, the should you is a content question. And if you think about the tension between content and container, the way it gets worked with is container without content is meaningless. But content without container is useless. And so the task of a good leader is actually much more complicated. You have to do both. David Whyte, the poet and writer, uses a phrase which we have used a lot in Reboot, which is good work done well for the right reasons. Good work and for the right reasons, those are content assertions. Done well is the container assertion. You need to create a profitable container. You need to create a container that is not leak-proof. But the reason you create the container that is not leak-proof is not to make somebody else wealthy. It's to create the necessary conditions for human beings to thrive so that they can then be in service to the next generation.
Yeah.
Businesses that rape and pillage the planet are not good businesses, no matter how profitable they are.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think that FranklinCovey's founder, Stephen Covey, also similarly spoke about the importance of balancing purpose and profit and how those two go together in building kind of a long, sustainable organization. So I think what you're sharing definitely resonates. You're now 20 plus years post this personal transformational moment, moving from business leader to now executive coach and helping others. You are entering, I've heard you say, your elder statesman era. Maybe talk about what the next 20 years has in store for you.
Oh, you've been listening to my therapy sessions. I actually don't say statesman. I say elder.
Elder.
That feels less. That feels a little bit more humility.
Well, I will call you an elder state. I think you've earned statesman, but I understand the humility. You can go elder as well.
Well, I just always have to check my ego because, boy, oh boy, it can be wily. It's a really good question. I've been sharing this a bit lately. I had a dream just a few weeks ago. And in the dream, I was attending my oldest son's wedding. He is actually about to be married in April.
Congratulations.
Thank you. My other two children are married. And in the dream, I was trying to figure out which suit I should wear. Should I wear the dark suit or should I wear a tuxedo? Trying to figure this out. And what I came to understand, and I'm in the middle of my sabbatical, and so this is a big piece of the work I'm doing right now, is that the suits represent personas. And the question I'm holding right now is what will it look like to be a grandfather, to be an elder? I turned 62 this year. Boy, that feels delightful.
You wear it well. So
thank you. I think that part of my work in the world, there's something profoundly important happening right now in coaching, which is the way I have been approaching coaching for 25 years is finding resonance with people. You know, my first book came out in 2019. And to this day, I still get people say, this book changed my life. But more, to this day, I still get people who are coaches saying, this book is changing the way I'm coaching. And so I'm moving into this space with all humility where I think I'm beginning to have an impact on how people approach this notion of leadership development. You know, God bless the work that you guys do, because it's really important. And you're right, the inside-out approach, we stand on the shoulders of giants like Stephen Covey. Mm-hmm. We stand on their shoulders. We are fortunate and privileged and morally obligated to continue the work that they started. Yeah. And one of the questions I'm holding right now is what is the kind of leadership we're going to need 4 or 5 years from now? Because we are living in some really tough times. There's a lot of fear walking the earth. There's a lot of hatred. And what is the responsibility of those of us who have dedicated our lives to consciousness, to leading from the inside out? What are we doing about creating the world that my granddaughter is going to be born into? That's my job as an elder. That's my moral responsibility. Yeah. Is to ask that question and to lean into that.
It's a powerful question. I'm curious, what is your early answer? What type of leaders do we need to build in the world for the next 3-5 years? And how is that different from maybe how leaders have been developed over the course of the last 10, 20?
I have been fascinated by the concept of redemption. I have been fascinated by the notion that leadership, business leadership, that goes beyond the notion of servant leadership, but becomes a mechanism by which those of us who are being led can complete the work of becoming our own greater self. See, I think the world is hurting. And I think we have business leaders have this greater responsibility. There's a business school I do a lot of work at called IEC. It's based in Barcelona. It's at the University of Navarra, Catholic university. And I think that there is a need for a reunification between the wisdom traditions of spirituality and ethics and morality in business. I think that there's something very powerful in this. But I don't have the full answer yet.
Yeah.
It's my work to lean into that question.
You've, over the course of our conversation today, you've brought up family a few times, your son's wedding, your daughter.
Don't make me cry again.
your daughter giving birth, and you'll be a grandpa soon. I'm curious, a lot of people ask about advice for new parents. I actually am curious the other direction. What have your kids taught you? How has being a father changed who you are as a person and who you are as a leader?
Oh, Lord. I don't know that I could properly convey all the ways, but I'll give you a quick example. I have a camper van. Okay, hashtag van life. It's got a shower, it's got a full-size bed, a little kitchenette, and I went camping last week with my youngest son, Michael. He's 28. One of the most profound things I've learned from my children is the importance of listening to them. Listening. My analyst used to answer my anxiety about whether or not I was a good enough father by saying to me, "You've given your children words. You've given them words. Don't worry. They know how to talk." And it's true. Their mom and I have raised 3 fabulous adults who know their own feelings, who know and have their words. But I think the thing I've learned the most is the power of listening, of really hearing their words. And one of the things that's been going on these last few weeks is just spending time one-on-one, just hearing what's going on in their lives. Not only is it the most important thing I've learned, it's also the luckiest thing I've ever experienced. To be the kind of parent that my children want to speak to, boy, oh boy, that's amazing.
Okay, I would say congratulations on many successes, but having a 28-year-old that's excited about going camping with their dad, I feel like that's probably high on your personal list of successes. And it sounds like you'll have a granddaughter or grandson soon that might be joining you in the camper van. So that's wonderful.
Got it.
So our final question to close is, obviously FranklinCovey is a leadership company. I am curious about a leader that has heavily influenced you along the way and what lessons we all can take from them.
When I was a young man, the first career job I had was working for a company called CMP Media, or CMP Publications. And the company was founded by a husband and wife team, Jerry and Lilo Leeds. And I learned so much about leadership from those two people. And I'll give you just one example. Lilo was adamant about what it meant to be a family-friendly company. And back in the 1990s, we had on-site daycare.
Wow.
And I was the first dad to bring my children to the daycare center, and I was the very first dad to bring 2 children to the daycare center. And one of the rules in the daycare center was the parent who brings the child to daycare must have lunch with their child every day. So I cite this because the ethics and the culture of having an insistent structure that said, no matter, you're in the middle of a meeting, I'm sorry, it's 11:45, I've got to go down to the daycare center, I've got to change a diaper and feed my kid lunch. What a brilliant way to lead a business. That heart, that family at the center of what it's about. That's the most important thing I learned.
I love that. I think that importance, I think as you've stressed throughout this conversation, of not just leading for profit, but leading for purpose, of what does your organization do in the world, how is it changing and improving the world, but also the kind of culture, community, sense of belonging and meeting that you provide to the people at work is so important as well. So thank you very much. This was a wonderful conversation. They say never meet your heroes. They're only going to let you down, but this is the opposite. This is a great conversation. I really, really appreciated all the insights, all the vulnerability and authenticity you shared today as a model for the type of leaders that we want to see in the world. So thank you so much for all listening. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and we hope you join us next week for another episode of FranklinCovey on Leadership.